morning, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome Meaghan Moore, Vice President of Global Partner Marketing at ServiceNow. Meaghan, welcome.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
We're chatting right before this call a little bit about your journey. So I'd love to have you take a minute and kind of introduce yourself.
Yeah, great. So I am Meaghan Moore. I've been here at ServiceNow for 2 years. Going backwards, though, I've been in and around Silicon Valley ever since I graduated college. It's interesting. I grew up in a very small town in Washington State. But as kind of a young teenager, I always knew that I wanted to live in San Francisco, be part of Silicon Valley and technology, and I wanted kind of some angle on the international thing. So I decided pretty early what my career was going to be, and I've stuck to it.
That's quite amazing. So I saw in your background you took a minor in Japanese. Any reason why you took that?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what I was previously mentioning. I think and this will date myself a little bit, but back when I was a teenager was when Japan was kind of on fire, right? They had all those really cool Sony Walkmans and all the technology and PlayStation and all the cool video games. Everything was happening in Japan. I was lucky enough to go over there when I was 16 years old with the Economic Development Council of Washington State. And I was representing what it was like to be a teenager growing up in America. Went all through Asia on that tour. But when I landed in Japan, there was something just tugged at my heartstrings. Like I absolutely fell in love with that country. And I knew that I wanted to be a part of Silicon Valley where technology was, but I wanted to marry that up with all of the innovation in Japan. And so as part of my college studies, I studied at Konan University over in Japan, lived with a host family. And then the first 10 years of my career was all Japan and business development in that region. So I stayed true to my vision from the start.
Wow. What an amazing story. In my early career also, when I was at Honeywell, I never lived in Japan, but I worked with Sumitomo Chemical. So I used to go there almost every month for a week and a half. So
yeah, same. We probably crossed paths over there.
Yeah, it's an amazing country and the cities are beautiful. So you have always had a global role. So what I think would be amazing if you kind of dial back maybe last couple of decades, through this journey, talk about an evolution of technology. I mean, speaking of Japan, we are very much in a global frame today, but it was kind of the beginning of globalization that we, kind of know it today was starting to happen, right? With China joining WTO and Japan is being a major competitor. So if you look at from an overall channel and IT and tech perspective, walk us through a little bit. What do you think the movie was, how it got played out the last couple of decades?
Well, I mean, gosh, that is a big question, right? You think back in the last 20 years, what has happened from a technological standpoint, it's pretty mind-blowing. Even the last 12 months, I mean, let's face it, right? I think, we had the onset of the internet. When I first joined the corporate world is when the internet and email were just coming out. I mean, that's really dating myself, but I used to print out every email and then read them before I would respond. Can you imagine? So, we had that. And then we had, as you fast forward on and the chips and everything becoming more prolific. And, back in my Veritas days, I was all part of the open source kind of technical alliances work where we were OEMing our product inside of HP as an example. So that was kind of interesting. And then you get to, digital transformation is probably for me when it got most exciting. But the interesting thing about that is before COVID, we were talking about a 3-year transition of, it'll take companies 3 years to do digital transformation. COVID for me was very interesting because it took a 3-year transition and stuck it all in 12 months, if not less, right? We all had to move very, very quickly. We all went online. Everything became digital facing instead of, events and online. And so that transition happened very, very, very quickly. That was the most interesting one for me from a career perspective because I was like in marketing at that point. And then obviously the onset of AI and everything that's happened there is extraordinary. I feel super fortunate to have landed now at ServiceNow. We started on AI in 2019 before people were even talking about it. We're at the forefront of AI with an extraordinarily strong relationship with NVIDIA that kind of powers everything that we do. And it's an extraordinarily high growth company. So you talk about the trifecta of being at the right place in the right time. Like this job is fun.
Of course. So I want to go back to the two words you said. One is digital transformation and the second one is sort of COVID, how it drove it. So can you maybe frame a little bit in your mind what was digital transformation and what maybe even it's today?
Well, back, if you look at 2019, we were all working with, just take from an ecosystem lens for a minute, we were all working with our partners of Is your website ready? Do you have great content? Do you have great landing sites? Are you reaching the buyers where they are? Because that's when we really got to the forefront of, hey, people are no longer coming to your website to research you first. They're actually making that decision, 12 to 36 months before they even buy you, depending on what your product is. That's when we really started realizing that it was more than just a point solution at a company. It was like buyers were way out there. Peer reviews were coming up really interesting. Like whatever people said they were using, everyone else wanted to jump onto. But partners in the ecosystem were kind of last to get on board with all those technologies of, oh my gosh, like I have to go out and find buyers. Like they're not going to come right to me, or they're not going to come at that point, like to SAP, and then you're going to give them to me. Everything changed. And so that's when we really started thinking about, we really need to teach our partners how to have, social presence and social media and landing pages and great ways, SEO searches, like all of that became interesting in 2019. And then you hit 2020. Well, you don't get to go visit customers anymore. You don't get to go to events and drive demand gen. You got to go out there in a digital world and find them and bring them back to you. And so that was kind of like all the business models changed in 2020.
So one other thing I wanted to kind of spend a little time on in your background is that it seemed like early stages of your career you're in hardware. Then you're like, I am in software now. So was there a reason the switch happened, or it's just the opportunities right? What happened there?
I think it was part of kind of how I got to ecosystem in general. I started very early in my career. I was very lucky to work with quantum hard drives. The allure to me to work with quantum was that the manufacturer of all hard drives was Japanese. It was Matsushita. I wanted to be in Japan and in that area. And so that was my beginning. And then I went to Veritas and Motorola and kind of worked my way from there. But it's when I really started partnering with companies that I thought it was interesting. At Quantum, I left there and I had a senior strategic sales job. I was calling on the Apple account, had a global account, held a bag. It was very exciting. We had 80% market share with Apple, so it was fun, right? It's like we're selling into this behemoth, iconic company. When I landed at Veritas, it was a technical alliances job. And that was where I realized, oh, wow, this is cool. Like instead of customer always being right, which is the mindset of sales, right? You go into a partnership where it's my company, their company. We put our technologies and our work together and we take it out and sell it together in the market. That really sparked a passion in me for like, wow, I really like this partnering thing. When I went to HP, I was working on kind of strategy for North America ecosystem and channel. I was in the strategy team of, okay, now how do you build an ecosystem and a channel to put your products out to market? I got tapped on the shoulder at SAP to come over. They were very early stages of indirect business. And they said, come over and help us build a partner-led demand generation where we teach our partners how to go out to market and work with us. And so that was an 11.5-year journey where we really built up that ecosystem together of something, very small to very large, one of the largest IT channels in the world, arguably by the time I left. Then I got tapped on the shoulder here at ServiceNow to come do the same thing. And so I'm very much a builder. So now, bring all the expertise of what I've done in my career, bring it to ServiceNow, and how do we build that channel and that ecosystem here to do, great and extraordinary things.
So let's focus on there. So let's start with HP because it's, as complex as any other organization could be, hardware, software, services. So talk to us a little bit, like when you get into a leadership role, what does your first 90-day look like? Like before you even take the job, I'm sure you do your due diligence, you talk to the leadership team. How do you frame your mind going into a role like this?
Yeah, I mean, HP was, everyone has that big career break, right? Where like things start happening. And HP was my first VP title. And so that was really exciting. So it's like, okay, now I've made it to this level, to your point, of where I can really start driving and leading and building what I think is right. So that first VP role is scary, right? It's like, okay, now I got to figure this out on my own with very little, input from the side. So that was an interesting transition. Going into SAP, what I did, I think it's more relevant to your question, is, okay, now I'm coming in as somebody who has this experience that they've asked to come in and help build this. So I think a 30, 60, 90-day plan at any company, and I did it here at ServiceNow as well, is don't say a word for the first 30 days. Like it is literally a listening tour. So I think 30 days is just go gather information, listen, meet the people, both internally and externally, mostly kind of internal, quite frankly. But really just start gathering and honor the past, honor what they built, honor who the people are, really figure them out. The next 60 days, then today's 60 is really about, okay, take all that stuff that you learned, marry it up with now talk externally to analysts, to, to customers, to partners, really gather all that information. And then up to, the last 30 days up to day 90 is putting that all together and say, okay, based on what I heard, here's where we are today. Here's what we've got. Here's the talent of the people. Here's what the budgets look like. But if you really want me to go build a best-in-class organization, here's what it looks like. Here's what we need to do it. And, here's the plan of, what it could look like for the next 12 to 24 months. And so that's the strategy I took both incoming at SAP and here at ServiceNow.
So in first 30 days, you said it's a listening tour. Who do you go and speak to typically?
The team that reports to you, number one. I mean, most importantly, you have to know who your team is. And, what I found at all, both companies is there is a very deep domain expertise and a lot of people that know a lot of things, right? Which is really, really great. I also found though, in any leadership role you come in and people aren't necessarily doing the jobs that drive their passion and or that their skill sets fit, right? And so it's really a great opportunity to go to those people and say, what's your superpower? What are you really, really good at? When you wake up in the morning, what's your passion? What do you love to do? And let's build a job around that. That's the right thing for the business. I find that really gets people in the boat and excited to kind of move forward with you. So, first and foremost is your own team. And then, of course, stakeholder teams, upper management, you start gathering kind of all this stuff and you just kind of start putting the pieces together. But 30 days internally, I think is super important.
So from a cadence wise, right? When you go in the first day, go through your HR stuff, the second day, the third day, and the next week, how do you pick your meetings? What goes through your mind? How do you pick the next event, next discussion? How does that play out? Is it more fluid, or is it, you get more and more structured as you go through it? How did that work?
I mean, I think you just start with, you start with I just want to meet the team first and foremost, and every single person on the team. So no matter how big your organization is, you just make the time. 15 minutes, 30 minutes, for the senior leaders, an hour. So important though. You got to know who is on your team and, what they do first and foremost. And then I think it becomes a little bit more fluid from there. You can start figuring out, oh, well, that sounds like an important stakeholder, or that person sounds like somebody we really need to collaborate with, or that person sounds like maybe there hasn't been a great relationship with. I'm going to go start building that one right away. Or, hey, this person's super aligned and is on board and they're really excited about us. Let's go meet with them. I mean, it becomes more fluid. After my first 90 days here at ServiceNow, though, I did a report up to my manager at the time. He was the CMO, Michael Park, and it was great. I went in and said, I've had 187 meetings in 90 days. And here's who I met with. And I had buckets. There were 80, I'm making this up, but 87 internal people. I talked to 12 media analyst people. I went and talked to 30 partners, whatever the matrix is. But I think it's important to have a good cross function of people that you've talked with.
So when you're talking, I mean, do you have a data collection frame in mind? You're trying to put a puzzle together. What is going through your mind from day 1 to day 90? What does that process look like other than engagement?
Yeah, I mean, engagement number one, and just making sure people know they're being heard and honored. Yeah, I really believe in honoring the past. You can't come in and just turn everything on its side. You kind of lose people's hearts and minds that way. But I mean, the data process for me is I'm very much a strategic thinker. And so the more I talk to people, I can literally see where I want to go. But I may not be right in what I think about in the first 2 weeks is going to be very different than what I decide after 90 days, right? But I start just kind of putting those pieces together, and the map just starts, kind of formulating, getting narrow and narrow as you go up. But it's constantly just, gaining ideas, bouncing those ideas off other people, knowing strategically where the business is going and how can I support that business. And from a marketing perspective, I very much take the mindset that sales is our customer. Whatever the business is doing, wherever that business is going, marketing needs to support and layer on everything we need to help them fuel and accelerate. So they're a very big speaker for me in terms of kind of how we bolt on.
So during this process, do you carry a notebook and you start sketching what the organization will look like, start putting numbers together? How does that tactically, how does it look?
Well, as much as I love technology, I am a note taker. I have notebooks and notebooks and notebooks. And because of my love of Japan, I have very beautiful pens that I use. Pens. Makes it more fun to write with. But yeah, I mean, my desk looks pretty funny by the end of this thing. Lots of notebooks, yellow sticky notes everywhere. I'm also a list maker. So I've got, lots of lists. I like to check those off every day. So yeah, there's a lot of old school work going on behind the scenes.
And then how do you, from a stakeholder perspective, as you said, sales is a big part of the focus. How do you build consensus? Because is it fair to say like halfway through 6 weeks in, you kind of have a framing in mind and you have a scaffold in mind that you're trying to kind of fill it out? Or like, how do you bring others on? Because it's not bam, like come in at the end of the 90-day, big presentation and everybody aligns,
No.
right? How does the alignment look like?
Well, you make it along the way, right? I think it's really important. First and foremost, you identify who the stakeholders are. And then to your point, as you build that scaffold, it's constantly going back to them saying, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Am I on the right track? Is this going to work for you? Does this align to the business? What am I missing? Where do you want to go? So I think, part of that is that if you build things with people in the boat with you, you're going to get a whole lot more collaboration and consensus coming out the other end. And so I absolutely believe in kind of bringing people along the journey with me. You can't bring everyone, but you can figure out who are the stakeholders and who are the key drivers in your organization that can help you get there and bring them along the journey with you. I mean, 5 brains, always better than 1. I'm a huge believer in collaboration and lots of input.
And traditionally, have you carried team members forward, like from other organizations, brought them in, or
Yes.
How does that work? You do.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny here at ServiceNow. I think there are 3 of us that were together at HP. We went to SAP and now we're at ServiceNow. So absolutely, and there's a lot of people from SAP that are now at ServiceNow. And similar to me, I've gotten in every company, every next company I get into is because somebody pulled me with them that went before me. So it's a big deal.
That's pretty amazing. So let's go to the sort of the outside world, partner world, right?
Yeah.
So if we kind of dial back, when you look at the ecosystem or channel that used to be called, the HP days, it was very hardware centric. HP was getting into software big time. When I look at the time frame you were there, right? And then of course SAP was all software. And can you talk a little bit about mid-market and enterprise? What did you see evolution wise started to happen on the partner side?
Well, I think what's very clear on the partner side is in the past, we talk about this a lot. You were either a reseller or you were an SI or you were an ISV, very, very clear lines of distinction of what you were. About, I think 10 years ago, that really started to blur where you could have one partner that did all things, right? I think it's becoming even more blurry now. Like, you can't categorize partners into certain categories anymore per se, right? They may do 20% resale, 40% SI. They also are a build partner showing up on our marketplace. So those worlds become blended for sure. And I think just in general, if you look at the customer buying journey, especially as you're talking these large enterprise deals, there may be 9 different partner types involved in a very complex big deal, or 9 different partners per se. So you come to the table with a very different decision board than you did, especially 20 years ago when it was just company to partner. It's very much now, there's a lot of entities involved.
So when I go back sort of maybe a decade or 15 ago, when the separation of partners were relatively clear, so you have distribution and you have large partners, whether you had CDW or not, that was different. And then you have a bunch of mid-market regional partners. So the structure used to be, you basically have dedicated teams for managed partners, and then you had some shared field, and then you had distribution manage the tail, right? Mm-hmm. Is that structure still roughly the same today, especially when you look through software lens, or is it different?
I think it's both is what I'd say. We definitely still have, if you look at just white space and how you go after accounts in general, right? Those really, really big, huge, large enterprise accounts are still going to be very SI driven or hyperscaler driven, right? If you look at, the very top enterprises in the world in the Fortune 50 or the Fortune 100, they have an SI and a hyperscaler tied to every single one, right? So there's this very beautiful marketing tactic you can do at that end, very specific ABM, super curated, high touch executive marketing towards that, just in general, right? They do a lot of other stuff, but just to generalize. And then if you go all the way to the long tail, if you say distribution, resale, they're going to go open up white space and markets that I love to say we either can't go after or that we don't want to go after, right? So there's very much still a home for traditional channel and ecosystem, but there's also a lot of gray in between. But you definitely can do like generalized categorization and put marketing tools and tactics against those different activities, depending on what you're asking your partners to do.
So when I think about 10 years ago, or even before COVID, 6 years ago, we didn't work for ServiceNow. We used to be an agency. So we did work for HP, we did work for SAP from a driving demand. And all I can think of is these mid-market partners, not the large ones, because they would have their own budget and own team. We would run events like there's no tomorrow, right? And then COVID happens, everything shuts down. and then they try to move online. You also talked about a buyer shift, right? So how partners marketed and what happened to the end user both changed, right?
Yes.
So how does the marketing organization look today compared to what it was at a global level, at your level, about a decade ago? What has changed fundamentally?
What's interesting is what has changed is back again. So your point about events and everything, everybody wants to do events. Oh my goodness, like everybody's doing events. I think what's changed around it though is that people used to do lots and lots of events, as you know, just to get out there, have the event, you come home, it's over, right? I think what's changed now is kind of an integrated end-to-end management of those events and what it looks like. And at ServiceNow, we're really pushing our partners like, don't just go spend 60 grand on a sponsorship and go to an event and let it die. Do a whole bunch of curation before the event. How do you go out and you do a whole bunch of digital marketing campaigns and ABM and all sorts of cool stuff, get customer success stories, get your messaging right, show up at the event, have a great experience at the event where you're collecting leads, you've got a draw, maybe you have like a really intimate executive roundtable where you're touching your top customers, you're having, you're doing great meetings. And then post-event, how do you then take all those leads and at the right point nurture them all through the funnel until you get to the end of the pipeline? So we're really working on kind of what does the integrated thing look like across that event in general. But then it gets really even more interesting. If you're a partner of ServiceNow and you're really interested in building your business on ServiceNow, we have key moments that matter throughout the year, and it starts at our knowledge event, which just happened a couple of weeks ago in Vegas. Our next knowledge event, we're already planning for. So what we work with our partners is you just went to knowledge, you had this great experience. Now we've got these series of world forums where it's on the road with ServiceNow and you go hit, 9 different world forums around the globe. So how do you take the message from knowledge, continue that drumbeat through world forums? You hit our sales kickoff in February, you join that, and then you're on the road to knowledge for May. And so it's a really like 12 to 24 month integrated plan now of you work for, from one point in the year to a 12 month to the next point. You get way more bang for your buck. You'll end up spending less money, quite frankly, and you will get more leads, more customers, and, take them on the journey with you. So that's what we're really focused on with our partners now.
That's quite amazing. So if I take that cycle, right, 24-month cycle, is it predominantly because the buyers of your product, they have a long journey through the process? Is that why, or is it you're trying to get more bang for the dollar by stretching it out over a period of time?
I think it's both. And to your point earlier, it depends what market you're going after. If it's mid-market, sales cycle is much faster. If it's high-end enterprise, longer. If you're going after a Fortune 50 company, it could be a 3-year journey, right? So it really depends what segment of the market are you going for, which customers are you going for, and then you can design it for that. I don't think anybody should be doing any marketing campaign, no matter what route you're going into, that's less than 6 months long. I've seen so many marketing organizations fail in that, they'll put something out to market. It's not working after 3 months, so they pull it. They'll put something else out there, and it's just this very chaotic start-stop. No campaign is going to be super successful after 3 months. You got to give it a 6-month run to let it get in there, to let it live, let it breathe, and, let it catch fire in the enterprise. For sure.
So in case of partner marketing, that has been a challenge, right? Keeping them focused beyond the quarter because 60 other vendors are chasing them to run some of the programs right. And they get another $5,000, they go run it, right? So how do you keep your partners focused? Like, how do you allocate the dollars? How do you take this longer term approach? How does your team look like that maps over them to kind of manage them? Can you walk us through a little bit?
Yeah, I think, we are in a really lovely culture here at ServiceNow, which is very much like, focus. Do less with more, quality over quantity. Don't do a bunch of activities for sake of doing activities, right? So what we do is we look at the top line from ServiceNow, like what is our key message and what's the key thing we're trying to drive in market? There's usually the big bets. Every company has them. Like, here's our big bet for the next 12 months. Fantastic. Then I'm going to go over to my sales team and I'll say, okay, given these are the top big bets, which partners are you going to use? Which partners you want to go after to do that? And then we will take a very targeted, one-to-one, one-to-few approach with our, top partners and go say, okay, here's what we're going after. Here's our value, our joint value prop together, partner ServiceNow, how we go out to market. And we really like our partners to be differentiated. So we will really work and curate that message with them of how are you going to differentiate in all the noise. And then we'll put that integrated plan together with them with associated budgets and, co-funding between both companies to go after it. For kind of more of the masses, we've just launched in February, one of the coolest things I've ever seen. We call it the Partner Marketing Experience. And it's really more of like a marketing university, but it's more than that. So As a partner, you can come in and say, I really want to market with ServiceNow. You click on this link. It takes you to this portal that says, do you want to learn more about us or how to market? Here's 30 plus modules on here's how you create a value prop. Here's how you do demand gen. Here's the best way to execute an event. That's all kind of online learning and things. Okay, now I want to go actually build something. I'm going to go to the build section of this. And we've got this very cool thing called Campaign Creator. This is where AI comes in, which I love. We have a ServiceNow LLM model that we've developed in this technology with structured web. Great vendor out there to be differentiated with. A partner can come in and very quickly say, here's my value prop, here's my logo, here's the product and the country I want to go after. Goes into Campaign Creator. We'll spit out a campaign in 3 minutes in any language you want at about 96% accuracy in the translation. And here this partner has a free, no cost at all, co-developed campaign they can go after with ServiceNow and put out in the market. That's fantastic, right? So everything's free up until now. So the masses can use that. Now a partner says, I've got some money I want to use or I'm eligible for MDF. They can go in our Activator, our demand center that gives them access to an agency that will do a one-to-one white glove concierge build program with them and build a 12-month campaign. It can be a super expensive one that's like fully integrated over 12 months using various different agencies and plug and play. They get to choose their own agencies. We don't dictate which agency it is. Or they can, come and say, I want to sponsor all the world forums in the next 6 months. Give me a really cool integrated, 6-month plan just to do these world forum events so that, the drumbeat goes throughout the year. And so that's when they start Activate through Demand Center. So it really gives our partners this very specific and targeted way they can come and plan with us. And we do one-on-one, with partners as well. And I'll get involved. I love talking to partners. So, I like to do that too.
That's amazing. So typically how many campaigns are you running per quarter? Like how many countries? What does that scale look like?
Well, what we do at the global level is we're going to build the infrastructure of kind of put AI to work for people. That's our big one right now. We also have some pretty large scale CRM campaigns. So we'll build those at a global level and then we'll hand those to the regions to go off and, customize and make those applicable to their areas. And then we're going to handle those global accounts. So we have all the, the accounts that span across the world that do multiple countries. Those are the ones we're going to manage at my level.
Got it. And do you also have concierge services that onboarding partner is going through? Like, how does that work?
We do. Yeah, that's part of that white glove marketing concierge service I talked about. So when you get into our, partner marketing experience, we will hook you up with a full onboarding program to help you and your journey. And
partners pay for those, or your team, your company are covering those?
So, expenses? It depends. If they're a pretty large scale partner that's doing some significant business for us, we're going to one-to-one or one-to-few them. I've got team members located all over the globe that will sit and do, one-on-one planning with partners. And then if they're a smaller partner or just ramping up, we've got agencies that will work with them. And in some cases, again, if they are a partner that's differentiated and going into a high priority for us, we'll absolutely meet with them and go one-on-one and give them some extra loving.
That's quite amazing. So going back to this 24-month cycle that you talked about, right? Do these partners, kind of follow that cadence, or you're talking about different classes of partners? The partners that are using your partner marketing tool and concierge, do they have this expanded horizon, or they're more short-term focused?
The ones using the concierge service are probably going to be more in six-month cycles, between 6 and 12. When I talk 24, that's, those are going to be our largest partners. Those are going to be the hyperscalers, the Accentures, Deloitte's, KPMGs of the world, right? They're going to be longer sales cycles. So it depends.
And Meaghan, how do you track metrics, like going back to your sales partners or sales as a customer? What metrics do you go back and show them on a quarterly basis or monthly basis saying, hey, look what we're doing for you guys?
Look at the cool stuff we're doing. Well, I would argue that at any vendor across the industry, when I talk to all my peers and all my experience, this is the hardest thing to do. When it comes to partner marketing, I think it's the hardest thing to track for a company, especially in cases where an SAP and ServiceNow, I kind of have the same charter where we're really teaching our partners how to go out and do partner-led demand generation. They're going to keep their own leads and their tracking, and they're going to go out and do that on their own. And so unless you have a reporting mechanism where they come back and say, hey, I ran it, it was great, here are the reports back, there's a big chunk of the business that we're not going to be able to take capture of. If they're going through our demand center and using the agency and the concierge service, we're going to track all that in the PRM systems and understand it. And so we track by a couple ways. Our company is all about net new ACV, partner source net new ACV. So we're going to take a number along with sales that says, how are we doing? Then we'll do like a marketing influence. What was the marketing influence on the pipe, at every stage? How many partners did we touch? Which campaigns seem to be the best? So we can tag those. It's an art and a science. I'd say we don't capture 100% of it. Wish we could, but I don't think anyone's figured that out yet.
And do you see AI helping in any form or shape as you kind of move forward from a data aggregation perspective?
I mean, AI changes everything, right? So yes, I think, we're still working on the MarTech stack and which companies are best at that and how that's all going to work. I think AI is doing some phenomenal stuff for us in terms of, predictive analytics and kind of how we do ABM and how you target people and how you get more personalized. There's so much goodness in marketing for AI. It's just crazy. When we talk about like skill sets of marketers that we're bringing in now, you have to know or be playing with AI in some way, shape, or form. Data-driven everything. Really understanding data and how to cut it and how to use it and how to, use the tools with AI to look at it. That's everything right now.
Where do you think the partner skills are at when it comes to AI?
Again, it depends on which partner type you're looking at. I think, a lot of partners are starting to dabble in it and starting to use it, and some aren't, quite frankly. But, it's always my biggest piece of advice is don't be afraid of it. It's the old analogy where if you're standing on a platform at a train station and the train's going by you really fast, it seems so overwhelming. It's like, man, those trains are whipping by me. If you're on that train and going, down the train tracks, it seems a lot less scary, right? You're on the train, you're moving, and you can at least kind of learn as you go. But get on the train is what we're telling people. Absolutely.
One thing I want to go back to that sort of your comment on old is new again when it comes to events. And we have restarted our own events, customers and partners. And these are small, like 30 to 40 people. We're doing in different cities. And when we did this we're a software company, but we used to be an agency and we'd call on behalf of HP or, SAP or whatnot. It was just be an email blast and dialing, getting people the sort of butts in the seat, right? And that was pretty much the problem. Maybe we'd ran some ads on social, but very little. Today, when I look at dialing, we can't get hold of anybody, so that we don't do anymore.
Do people even have phones anymore? I don't know.
Exactly. And even if they do, they have switchboard numbers they don't give out, right? And they get annoyed if you call them on the mobile. Second is email. People really don't register. Most of it is coming from social, significant, or referral, right? And so going back to you, event is just a means to an end. It's not the end. It's the pre-marketing and post-marketing with the content that's being generated. So how do you do that with partners?
So with partners, it's, we'll go with partners and say, what are you trying to achieve at that event? Who do you want to meet there? What's your messaging? What are you trying to do? And then it's the same tools that you're using, right? Like social is absolutely everything. I mean, this digital world and how you're going out and finding buyers where they are. How do you push ads to them? How do you show up in communities where they're at? The referral, the word of mouth, all that kind of stuff, that is all still relevant, but you really have to get like hyper focused. And I think that's where I get excited about like ABM and cluster ABM. Like, how do you use ABM and clusters to go after a targeted group of people or messages that you're looking for? There's a lot of goodness in ABM that we have not uncovered yet, that I just took on the ABM team about 2 weeks ago here at ServiceNow. And I am just like drooling about all the cool things that we get to do with them.
So tools like 6 Sense and those kind of tools, or when you say ABM, what kind of thing?
It could be those kind of tools, but really, it's more the intent of ABM. So if you are trying to drive a certain part of, like if you have a part of your pipeline that's stale, if you're trying to drive a very specific group of accounts, like say you go with, a hyperscaler and say, here's the top 30 accounts we want to target coming out of an event, as an example. You can use ABM in a very personalized way to go after those 30 accounts. Like with the message is probably 70% the same, and then you're going to curate around that, the 30% individualized and very personal to those individuals you're trying to target. That's where I get excited about it, right? Like, how do you really take parts of your pipeline or come out of an event or even go into an event and really target the actual individuals that you want to hit while you're there? Make it valuable, make it memorable, make it curated.
So if you go back to your HP days, and you come back now, and you don't have to share the exact number, but on a percent basis, if you looked at your budget, right, global marketing budget, what portion of that goes into data and infrastructure now versus what did before?
A whole lot
versus
more
people
than
and
it did
programs.
back then, right? Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. It was people and programs back then. SAP was, people and programs. And then, we started to get kind of more data. I'd say now we're spending a lot of our money on data and systems. And, again, really making that, amazing MarTech stack work in our favor. And we're putting together a pretty unique MarTech stack here at ServiceNow that I haven't done at any other company. So I'd say it's pretty significant here.
Yeah, and then, of course, being ServiceNow, you have a huge opportunity because when you go to generative, you may get away with not having a lot of data. But when you go to predictive, and if you're trying to build things together, you need clean data, right? So
yeah. And now we've got the AI agents, which makes it even cooler, right? So between all these different systems and these different stacks, we're going to have these agents talking to each other, strategically, not today, but when they really start orchestrating and getting, that technology up and running, it's going to be phenomenal.
Okay, so we're kind of coming to an end. So I want to ask you sort of my favorite question that I ask leaders like you. So when you look back, when you're starting your career, whether it's the first one was, I was just looking at, let's say at Symantec, right? Well, when you look back to Meaghan at Symantec, what advice would you have for her? Like looking forward, how far you have come, how you have come.
Yeah, I think my favorite piece of advice that I give to anyone, either, no matter what level you are, is I think, you should always approach your job as if you are the next level up from where you actually are. Because I think you will look at the world very, very differently. Even in my own job, I don't answer as if I'm, Vice President of Global Partner Marketing. I answer as if I'm SVP Field Marketing and, Enterprise Marketing, right? Because how my boss answers is going to be very different than I do. And it really gives you a much broader perspective of the business as a whole. It puts you in the mindset of what is right for the company and for your customers. And you're going to make much more strategic comments and plays and decisions than you would if you're just acting in your own role. I think that's the most important thing ever. I think from a development standpoint too, if you think about it, as your boss leaves and they're looking to backfill that person, they might say, oh, so-and-so actually, is pretty in tune with the business and seems to know, everything beyond her own job. We should give that person this job. So it's also a good way to get on a promotion and a career upwards mobility angle as well.
But how do you do that tactically? Like, what do you do in your job that is a step above you? Like, how does everyday week.
Yeah. I mean, just a great example. I think we are all in a world of decreased budgets, decreased headcount. How do you do more with less? So rather than holding on so tight to something that you believe you need in your own organization, like I really need that headcount or I need this budget, you can think about do I, or if I gave it to the digital marketing team, could I get more value out of putting a headcount over there than in my own organization? Could I give it to product marketing and I'd get more support out of product marketing if they take the head instead of me? It's more like that. It's like, how do you look across the business and make decisions that are good for everyone and not just in your own world?
Maybe one last question, Meaghan. So if you think about next 12 to 18 months, right? What are the 2 or 3 major things that's going to get you kind of excited?
Well, I mean, God knows what's going to happen in even 12 months. I think so much has changed in the last 24 months, but I think what I'm probably most excited about is I think AI and the technologies are going to allow us to do things in marketing that we haven't even dreamed of yet, right? There's a lot of debate and conversation about, is AI going to take over marketing or is AI going to develop all code from now on? The answer is absolutely not. It's not. I think what AI will do is it will take care of 80% of administrative tasks that, we don't need to take care of. But 20% of what we do still needs to be very strategic, very human touch, very relationship driven. And, we need to understand what AI is doing and how it's working so that we understand how the world is operating. But, I think there's a very interesting and strategic role for humans, in marketing, especially. I think, there's so many cool new things coming on that we just need to stay super close to that. And I am all about let's lead the market and innovate with all those tools. Let's do stuff that nobody is doing yet so that I can have conversations with people like you and talk about all the cool things we're doing that nobody else is. That's what I want to be doing in the next 12 to 24 months.
That's amazing. So we're going to have an event here in Palo Alto, I believe around September 18th. So we'll reach out to you. It'd be amazing to have you on the panel.
Sign me up.
Thank you for your time. It has been amazing. The hour just flew by, but thank you, Meaghan.
Thank you. Great talk.